Wait for it. Wait for it. And we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters of Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, a stabby chaos coordinator, and one chief shenanigator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. J.R. Wise, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi, I'm J.R. Wise. I'm a former Marine and Army National Guardsman. Grass wasn't greener on the other side, no matter what anyone tells you. I write military science fiction set in the far future for the most part. I write for myself at Kinetic Frontline with a couple other authors, and I write for Canon Publishing, J.F. Holmes's publisher. I've got 3 books out, and I think we're mostly going to talk about Doom Company today.
Absolutely. All right. So before we get started, this is the Blasters and Blades. So we do have to ask you the religion questions. Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. Let's go.
All right. Stargate, Babylon 5, or Battlestar Galactica?
Stargate. I love Richard Dean Anderson. I love Jack Carter. That whole universe is really cool, and it's inspired so many other cool stories. Not to say that the other 2 aren't great, but Stargate's better.
All right. And because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, the 13th Warrior, Pathfinder, or the Northman?
The Northman. I'm a sucker for anything that's Viking related.
All 3 of them were, actually.
Oh, that's true. Well, the Northman's the only one I've seen. How about that?
Okay, the 13th Warrior is I think it's supposed to be a Beowulf retelling, imagining, or maybe it was Gilgamesh. I didn't catch it when I watched it. It's just good. It's got Antonio Banderas. I'm probably butchering that dude's name, but as a Moor who ends up fighting with the Vikings. In fact, you've heard the old quote, "Lo, though I see my mother, lo, though I see my father," that prayer. That's not actually a prayer. They invented it for the 13th Warrior.
Oh.
It ties into a lot of the themes of actual Norse mythology, but it's not an actual like line for line thing. And Pathfinder is it's about a Viking longship that lands in America, ends up getting in a fight with the natives and loses. And so this boy gets left behind, partly because of the storm. The boy gets left behind, raised by the natives. And then when the Vikings come back for round 2, it's basically like, who does he side with kind of thing. And it's his coming of age story of this one Pathfinder character. But it's really cool. It's dark and gritty. Don't watch it with your kids, but it is awesome.
I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's really good. All 3 of those are amazing. So, all right. So normally we would ask you your favorite dinosaur, but you've answered that one on one of the panels you were on. So instead I'm going to ask you, what's your favorite zoo animal?
All right. 2 answers here. 1, real world giraffe, because I don't actually believe that they're real. I think they're robots. And 2nd, infantry Marines are actually my favorite zoo animal, because if you've ever been on a Marine Corps base, it's basically a zoo, and infantry Marines are the most unhinged of the zoo animals there.
Yeah, but they're fun to get in fights with.
They are.
I won't bore you, dear listener in the audience, to all the times we got in fights with Marines when I was active duty in the Army, but it was a lot of fun, a good fun had by all. So I learned from the Marines the old motto, "Gear adrift is a gift," when they would steal my shit. And so when we stole stuff back, it got heated. We stole a guidon from the company that stole from us. I mean, it's not my fault the guy was asleep on guard.
Yeah, there's only one thief in the military. Everybody else is just trying to get their stuff back.
We were just doing a hostage exchange, It worked, by the way. And my friends that were Marines at the time said that there's a strong likelihood that corporal was no longer a corporal after getting busted sleeping on guard duty in a war zone.
Oh, yeah, he was definitely a Lance after that.
If not PFC.
Yeah.
The infantry doesn't. This is I think this is universal probably by just about any infantry unit in the world. But falling asleep on guard duty when you're in a war zone, even if you're on the base, is a no-go. That is just something you do not do. For exactly that reason, because if I had malintent, I could have done some stabby action going on, and he would have been none the wiser.
Yep.
So, all right, we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes, despite the previous conversation. So, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
Red wine.
Outstanding. Is it because it's supposed to be good for you health-wise, or just cause?
Yeah, we'll go with the health thing. Sure.
I never got into wine. I tried mead once, and I really wanted to try some more. The one I tasted, it was like really dry. I'm told that's not all mead, but I saw mead for the first time in the 13th Warrior, and I'm like, huh, honey alcohol. I want to try that.
Yeah, most mead is pretty sweet. I actually make my own mead.
Oh, that is awesome.
Yeah, it's crazy easy. I won't say how to make mead because it is stupidly easy, and there's might be teenagers listening to this.
So is that something that's cost effective to make, or is it like a not really a vanity, just a expensive hobby?
It's not terribly expensive, especially if you can kind of source the honey locally, because that's the most expensive ingredient is the honey.
Okay.
I know a few people who keep bees, so they get.
Oh, that works. I know there's such a thing as economy of scale, but that only gets you so far.
Right.
All right. So before we start asking the question that I was about to ask you before we started, you did mention that you were in the U.S. Army and the U.S. Marine Corps. So do you feel like your time in uniform affects the way you tell stories?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I started writing as a way to deal with things that happened in the military, specifically in Afghanistan and some other places I've been. And it was an assignment from my counselor. She wanted me to write down things that happened and exactly as they happened, and I couldn't do it. She's like, well, make them sci-fi or fantasy or something, so you have some standoff. And then I was able to do it, and I let some people read it and like, you should try and publish this. And so I did. So I mostly write from experience, to be quite honest.
That's actually how I started writing too. Although mine was a therapy class at the VA. I think, was yours at the Veterans Administration?
No, I actually started seeing a counselor when I was in grad school.
Okay.
At school, and I kind of followed her out into the private sector when she left the school. So I still see her today.
That's cool. I know I had the same thing. I did sci-fi because I thought at the time like fantasy was just too visceral, because you can't help but there are bodily elements that leave the body when you stick pointy things through them. And fantasy, unless it's magic, it's a lot of up close and gritty warfare like we're not used to. So I thought sci-fi would be cleaner. And of course, the more research I did, I'm like, nope, it's just as gritty. Plasma bolt, magic bolt, arrow, sword, bullet, it all does gruesome things to the bodies.
Yeah, exactly. And like there's a lot of like close end, like knife kills and stuff in my sci-fi.
Oh, because
so I didn't even avoid that by not going fantasy.
That was the thinking when I started, because I got the same assignment, like, use the sci-fi or the fantasy. And then when the lady that taught the class was actually a professor at the College of William and Mary at the time. She was an adjunct because her husband was active duty Navy. And she was like, these are good, Jared. If you consider publishing, I'm like, no, authors are supposed to have lived a lot of life. And she kind of bopped me on the back of the head. It's like, you've been to 2 war zones. What more do you want? Which is essentially the same treatment you got, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
It works though. People pay me for my trauma therapy. I trauma dump, and then they pay me for it.
Yeah.
Now, have you run into, because I did in my first book, where you wrote stuff that really happened to either you or someone and they're like, this is so unbelievable. You got to edit this. No one will believe it.
Oh yeah, especially with my first book. And I'm not going to lie, I was really skirting some NDAs in that first book, especially in the first short story that was part of it.
Allegedly.
Yeah, allegedly. But there's feels like that couldn't happen. And I'm like, sure. And people, or sometimes people ask me, especially people I know that have read the book, like that know me personally, is like, did you just change the names and stuff? It's like, I can promise you I've never been to Venus.
Well, maybe was it goat something, where they had like the mind walking that the CIA was trying to do back in the 60s. I forgot the name of that though.
Oh, the one with George Clooney in it, like
the movie was based on a real program.
Yeah, the Men Who Stare at Goats.
Yeah, but that there's an actual program they did that. There's some people convinced that they were leaving their body and walking in other places. There's a name for that operation. I've heard them talk about it because the CIA ran it.
Yeah, like it was a real thing. Like it was like in the era of like MK Ultra and all that.
Yeah, stuff. MK Ultra, that was one of the programs. Yeah. So the I had one where it was like I actually wrote about something that happened to me, because we were doing our last right seat ride, which I don't know if you did any convoys. That's basically your training wheels ride, where they kind of let you run the show, but they're there to make sure you don't step on your Jimmy. When you're going through. And we were doing that, and the guy that I was driving with, because I had to certify on the 18-wheeler before I went back to my gun truck, he was a huge cigar smoker. I hadn't picked up the habit yet. So he leans down, and we have the old hillbilly armor, there's other names for it. If you know, you know. And so he leans down to light his cigar because our truck was so old it had a cigarette lighter. And then I leaned down to grab a Gatorade out of the thing, and an RPG went through my window, out his. And if like one of us had sat up, if it had just nicked the armor, I mean, because it's got an impact for it to explode. I actually have the medical report from the burn on my neck because both of us got burned from it going through. So I could prove it happened. And people are like, "Oh, that never happened. You're making that shit up." I'm like, "Well, actually, here's what Dr. So-and-so had to say about it." Because there was a lot of reports on that one. But yeah, that's one of those things where like half a second any direction and we've been gone. You write that kind of stuff, and sometimes people are like, "Oh, that was too close. That never happens." Right?
Oh, yeah, it's like when I was in Afghanistan, we got the first time we hit an IED. Like I found shrapnel holes in my uniform, but none in me. I'm like, how the hell did I not get hit?
Or I found some shrapnel that worked itself out. I actually have surgery August 2024 to remove it. I don't even remember that one hitting me. Just because you're so hyped, right? Like, they did, and like I got shot twice. Nobody believes it. I mean, I can prove it because I had to go to supply to get a new SAPI plate. I was like, no, you don't recover from that. It never hits you in the bulletproof. I'm like, no, the Army issues it to you because that's where most of the time you get hit. Like, know, we're not stupid. The other trope, now this didn't happen to anyone I know, but it's in a lot of like World War II types where you get shot in the helmet and the guy takes the helmet off to look at it, like, dude, I got close. And then the next round hits him through the head because he took the helmet off. And everyone laughs at that too, but that actually did happen. There are a few documented cases of that in World War I and II.
Yeah. I mean, there was enough bullets fired in World War I and II. I'm sure every way to possibly die from a bullet happened.
Yes, absolutely. So you did mention that, your friends ask if you just changed the names. Did you actually draw from people that you knew in the military, whether covertly or overtly?
Yeah, almost every named character in one of my books is based on a real person. In Doom Company, the book we're talking about tonight, like it's about me and my platoon sergeant. It's told from my platoon sergeant's perspective, and he actually loved it. He really enjoyed the book. And every character in there minus one is based on a real human or a conglomeration of several people.
Okay. Did you ever so you've talked about how it affects the way you create content. Do you think post-service, the way you engage with content by watching war movies, procedurals that involve weapons, that kind of thing, does it change the way you engage with content? Can you turn your brain off and just enjoy, whatever, or do you like count the bullets and
it definitely does. So anything that's a little more sci-fi, like if I see, Marines 400 years from now, like whether it's Warhammer or Halo or whatever, fighting aliens, like that's a little more digestible for me. Like I can't still watch, more modern stuff. Like I won't engage with war movies. I lived the nightmare. I don't need to watch it. And, maybe one day I'll get past that and I'll be able to watch things like Lone Survivor or The Hurt Locker or whatever. I've never seen those movies and I don't plan to. But sometimes it kind of rears its ugly head, like even on stuff that's very sci-fi or fantasy. Like my wife and I are very into we're very into the Arcane series on Netflix. And during season 2, and in the first episode, one of the characters, Jace, he says, do you know what it's like to be right next to your friend and he gets, all jacked up and you don't? And then my wife, look, we'd been drinking. She turns to me, he's like, do you know what that's like? And that is the only time I've ever called my wife the C word. And like, even she says it was totally justified.
Yeah, that's always the fear. Cause I know people that have opened up about those experiences and had their spouse tell them they were sociopaths and murderers. Because the other part is the dirty little secret of war overseas, where life is cheap, is not everyone that fights you is of age by Western standards.
No, I've shot at children, and I had to have that conversation with my in-laws at Thanksgiving a couple of years ago. They were actually sitting at the table debating whether or not like it's moral or ethical to shoot at children, even if they're shooting at you. And I walked up and I said, I need you guys to all shut the F up right now, because like clearly none of you have ever done that. And I have. Yeah. So please stop.
So Wow, that went darker than I intended. But I definitely feel you. Now, this is a military movie, but it came out before you went to war, so you might have watched it. I have been told that the movie Jarhead is the equivalent to the Marine Corps as Stripes was to the Army. So, one, have you seen Stripes? And two, have you seen Jarheads?
I've seen Stripes, but not Jarhead.
Okay. I definitely could relate pre-war, pre-deployment to the Marine and Jarheads. His big complaint is he was a scout sniper, and then he gets out on a mission where he's finally going to use his skills and take out an enemy target, and then they're like, no, we're just going to blow it up instead. Because that's how every grunt feels before you go to war. Is like, you trained your whole life for the big game, and when it comes, don't put me on the bench.
Yeah.
So I could relate to that. And Stripes was just cool because, what kind of training? Army training, sir. You can't beat that. Before there was John Wick, there was that John. So speaking of nerdy things, and you mentioned like Helldivers and Halo and all that, you have certain helmets behind your head. So
yes.
One, do they fit?
Yes, I made them so that I could actually wear them. So both of these helmets, the Helldiver and the ODST, I actually have the full suit of armor for both. I've worn the Helldiver to a convention in Virginia Beach, MarsCon, earlier this year. And this has been my Halloween costume the last couple of years. And actually, technically, with the new update to Helldivers, the ODST could be a Helldiver's costume if I just make the cape for it. Yeah, this one's 3D printed, the Helldiver. This one's EVA foam, so it was cut by hand. Both are hand painted with acrylic. Yeah, I'm a big cosplay nerd. I love it. I'm actually working on 2 other Helldiver costumes right now for friends of mine because a buddy of mine wants to take his daughter trick-or-treating this year with, and he wants me to go with him and like escort her as 2 Helldivers.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I'm super excited. I'm hoping I can get his armor done in time, but I think I will.
So my problem is the one size fits all when it comes to headgear never does. It never fits me. So like I even bought the larger size of Iron Forge LLC out of Orlando, Florida. I had them make a helmet based on my reservist book.
Mm-hmm.
And it was supposed to be the biggest size he could make it without it looking too boxy, and it still didn't fit.
Yeah. So what I did with the so I made the ODST completely out of cardboard first a couple times to make sure it fit right. And then this one, there was actually, I bought it from the template from Galactic Armory, and there was basically a head sizer piece that they had, and I just printed it a couple times until it fit right.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's one of the things. Like, I knew a guy who wrestled with me in middle school, and that's one of the things. He was so big, he had to order a college helmet for his JV or for the middle school football team. So like, sometimes the one size fits all. It doesn't for lots of people, and I'm one of them. Unfortunately, more room for brains or booze or whatever.
They're both.
Both. So, how did you get into cosplaying? Because obviously, you've been a nerd from way back, even before the Marine Corps.
Like it's something I'd always wanted to do, and then right before my wedding, actually in 2021. I'd ask my wife, it's like, how would you feel about the ring bearer being dressed as Master Chief? And she thought I was joking. It's like, no, I'm dead serious. And the ring bearer was her little nephew, who I think was like 10 or at the time or something. And I told him, like, how would you like to dress as Master Chief at the wedding? And he's like, and of course he's excited. So I built a whole suit of Master Chief armor for him. And then the maid of honor's husband, I made a Halo Marine from Halo 3 costume for him. So like in the middle of the wedding, like the DJ interrupts the officiant with the Halo 2 theme song. And then the mini Master Chief and a Halo Marine walk down the aisle with the ring. And it was funny because like the kid was so nervous that he was holding the ring out like it was radioactive and he was afraid. Perfect. I can't believe my wife let me do it.
That is awesome. One of the guys who's briefly wrote before he had kids and then he had to get a day job was a Marine that I know. And he actually had the 501st do sword arch with lightsabers.
Oh, that's dope.
Yeah. So, you could have done a real sword arch. You could have gotten some Marine friends, but did you end up doing a nerdy sword arch instead?
We didn't do any kind of sword arch. 2 of my groomsmen were civilians, and then like 1 was Army, and then 2 were Army, 1 was a Marine. Yeah, so we didn't end up doing that.
Yeah, but you don't have to be a veteran to do cool stuff with Jedi or medieval or whatever. Like, there's lots of places you could have gone with that.
Yeah, I mean, I was already kind of pushing my luck with all the nerdy stuff. Like,
Yeah.
to be quite honest, like my wedding was dope. Like, we had pizza for the reception. There was a secret bar menu. Like, we played a lot
That
of
was awesome.
like Viking metal and stuff at the reception. It was.
So was the wife converted, or was she already a member of Team Nerd?
Converted. Like she definitely was not a nerd when I met her, but she's coming around.
So if you want to see what he's talking about with the nerdiness, you should follow him on TikTok. Their videos are hilarious. I'm sorry, they amuse the hell out of me. I've watched a lot of your videos. They're pretty funny.
Yeah, we also have them on Instagram, and a lot of times we'll post them on Facebook too. But yeah, I think like there's a couple of videos that are like approaching like 2 million views, and I think it's mostly just because my wife is hot, not so much because I'm funny.
No, it's the body count question is a funny one. Because her reaction was so perfect. I don't know if she scripted that or it was just off the cuff or what, but that was hilarious. And then the one where you're reading the book upside down and she comes, it's like when you're married to a Marine and she gives you the crowns and then you flips the book over for you. That was the other one that was pretty funny.
Yeah, the number of comments I got about like, did you actually eat the crayon though?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you that, but I know the magic. Sometimes you just don't want to share it.
Yeah. And then there's a lot of questions like, why would you eat the gray one? I was like, I don't know. It's the one I grabbed. Like, you saved the good ones for the end, like the red ones.
Yeah, that's the weird one. So when you were in the Marines with the infantry, did they delineate by like mech, light, heavy infantry, or was it just infantry was infantry?
So within the Marine Corps, like there's different MOSs with the infantry. Like 03 is the infantry field. Like 0311 is rifleman. That's what I was. 0321 is recon. 0331 is machine gunner. 0341 is mortar. 0351 assaultman. So on and so forth. There's a bunch of different infantry MOSs.
Is that your puppy?
Yeah, Sandy, stop.
Cool. It's cool. I like dogs, so it's all good. So was that a culture shock going from Marine Corps infantry to Army infantry, or was it?
Oh my Lord. So many things were different. Like just to have like there's no concept of a weapons squad in the Marine Corps. Like you have a weapons platoon and occasionally you get attachments from them. But like when I went over to the Army and then it's like, oh, we have to wait for weapons squad to catch up. It's like, why? Like we have the momentum. Let's just keep pushing because that's what we would have done in the Marine Corps. So that was odd because like machine gunner was its own MOS in the Marines. Like you were a rifleman only had saws, and actually now they all have M27, so no one even carries a belt fed.
Yeah, they've changed a lot since I got out in 07. So the size of the squad used to be different. At one point in time, the infantry in the Army was 3 fire teams of 4. Plus the platoons or squad leader, so it'd been 13-man squads, but they did away with that long time. Officially, we kept it on the books because they had the balloon theory, which is basically the idea that you have your unit structure intentionally understaffed. So if you have like a giant war where you're drafting everyone, training privates is easy. So then you just slap them in at the bottom and push everyone, like the privates become corporals, et cetera, so you can expand quickly. But eventually we just said, we've been running these squads with 9 people and that fire team just not there, and they just made it the standard because now of course the squad fits into the Bradleys better.
Right. Yeah. When I was in the Army, it was 9 people. When I was in the Marine Corps, it was 13. I think it's 12 in the Marine Corps now. Like it's changed pretty significantly.
Yeah, if you look at like World War II and even Korea, the Army and the Marine Corps had the same, and then as part of the Cold War stuff, it fluctuated and then they just solidified. I actually think you have more flexibility with the 3rd fire team, but nobody asked my opinion. So
yeah, I liked having 3 fire teams because then you always have assault, support, security.
Yep, and that's what I was originally trained on. But like I said, they change all that all the time, and sometimes for reasons that make no sense to anybody except for whoever made the decision.
Yes,
and most of the time they're so high up they're removed from any infantry stuff that the rest of us are actually doing.
Yeah, and I thought that would go away when I went into the civilian world, but now I work for a fire department, and it's the exact same stuff on a smaller scale.
Yeah, and it's the other one is that if there's somebody does too good of a job, you never promote them because you want to keep them doing that good job, which is horrible for morale. And then the screw ups get promoted to get them out of the way where they can't do any harm.
Yeah.
You see that a lot too. When you did go from the Army, was the mount stuff the same that you guys did, the mission oriented urban terrain? So basically, city combat, dear listener.
Yeah, it was very, very similar. Now in the Marine Corps, I was I was a team leader when I
Right.
got out. And so that was a little different than being a squad leader in the Army. And I remember we were doing our workup for my last deployment with the Army, and my company commander comes up behind me and says, "Hey, Sergeant Wise, where's the frontline trace?" And I turned around and said, "I'm it." And he's like, and I got chewed out so bad in the AAR for being out front of everyone and mount. It's like, it's not your job, Sergeant Wise. You're the squad leader. I was like, yeah, that's well.
That was the hardest part because I was a junior team leader on my infantry squad, so it was a Bravo team. And knowing that when the striker drops the ramp, you're the first one out as the Bravo team leader, which means in a truly like kinetic firefight, your lifespan is not always that great because you're the first target. That was definitely a pucker factor. And of course, they revel in telling you all that, the ones that aren't the first out. Like,
Yeah.
hey, Sergeant Handley, you going to make it today? Although I don't know if that's true because we got away from some of the vehicles we had and they went to the LATVs, the Oshkosh makes, the medium and light all-terrain vehicles.
Yeah.
They were replacing those.
Yeah. I was when I was in Afghanistan, I was with First Line Armored Reconnaissance that runs out of LAV-25s, which is essentially the Marine Corps equivalent of the Stryker. But a lot of times we were just dismounted because there were places we just couldn't go in Afghanistan with those vehicles. And but they started to get phased out by the MATVs and the MRAPs.
So when you were in the Marine Corps, and then we'll start talking about the books that brought us here, but when you were in the Marine Corps, were they doing the hand-to-hand belt system, or had that happened yet?
Yeah, so in the Marine Corps, if you wanted to get promoted to corporal as an infantryman, you had to be at least a green belt, which is like the third level. I went to Brown. I started working on black, but then like deployment came around. It's like, no, we need to work on like actually shooting guns.
Yeah.
So because I was in the Marine Corps, I was actually security forces for a few years because I got shanghaied into that. But then oh God, it was kind of cool though. I'm not gonna lie, it was kind of cool. It was pogue as fuck, but it was pretty cool. And then I went to the fleet. But
yeah, when I went to basic training, they were still teaching the Army chop, which is just like the knife hand to the collarbone kind of thing, World War II style. And all the hand-to-hand, I remember the drill sergeant was telling us, like, you're basically going to learn enough to think you know more than you do and get your butt kicked. So don't use any of this. It's not going to do any good, but I have to teach you, so you have to learn. And then as I was getting out in 07, they started teaching, like they were transitioning to hand-to-hand being the Gracie method that evolved to whatever they're doing now. So they finally realized that, sometimes in close quarters, you actually might need to know how to punch a motherfucker. I mean, person, sorry. You know what I mean? Like, and so they started, but the Marines were way ahead on that one. They were leading that one.
Yeah, the Army has 4 levels now, I think, and at least they did when I was in. And I went through level 2, and now like me and a couple other vets actually teach defensive tactics to like new fire recruits at the fire department we work for. It's literally just enough to like, break contact, get away, call the police.
Yeah. That's one of the things that most people that go in the infantry are generally interested in that stuff anyway. So like you didn't have to ask them to learn it, but maybe unifying it so they can work together was a good idea.
Yeah.
So, but I was the jerk who asked when we did the bayonet training, because if you run out of bullets, this will save your life. Well, what makes you think the other guy's out of bullets just because you are?
Yeah.
And of course, the answer is always push-ups. So, all right. Well, I want to talk about Doom Company because I've been seeing you talk about it all over. But before we do that, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man.
They were called the Human Marine Corps, but their cause was never humanity's, until the sleeper awoke. A century ago, all but 2 members of Lance Scipio's unit were executed for bringing dishonor to his regiment. Now he wakes into his strange new time and is tasked with whipping into shape the worst squad of misfits in the entire Human Marine Corps. The price of failure? Death. This completed series is set in the worlds of the hit Human Legion series by Tim C. Taylor, now released with a special novelette titled No Marine Left Behind, Freedom Can Be Won. So dive into this debut novel by author J.R. Handley as he takes you on an action-filled sequence of military science fiction glory.
All right. Thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude, dear listener. You'll get a kick out of this since you work with first responders. And then we're going to talk about your book. When I was writing that one, there is a combat scene involved because when I wrote The Legion Awakes, the prequel was actually part of one book. They split it for marketing purposes. And so there's a death scene in there where they're fighting in space, but they're in the space station with swords because for the bad guy, it was ceremonial. So, it didn't have to make sense. And if you're worried about punching holes in your spaceship because you don't want to let the vacuum inside, blades actually make sense even in a sci-fi setting. The publisher didn't think I got the physics right of what happens when you start cutting limbs off and in zero G. So I'm calling my aunt who's an ER nurse, and I'm sitting at Starbucks at this table talking to my aunt just about cutting heads off and how you kill this person and that. And I didn't realize everyone was scooting farther and farther away until the cop shows up and he's like, Mr. Handley, is there anything you want to tell me today? I'm like, no, I'm an author. It's okay. I promise. So, but I did get solid advice because his wife was an author. He wouldn't tell me what, so I'm guessing it's probably the steamy side because otherwise, why would you care? You just tell everybody. And he's like, yeah, if you're not at least on one government watch list as an author, you're not doing it right.
I agree with that.
But yeah, I figured you'd get a kick out of that. So now that we got that out of the way, so I like what I've heard about it. Is this out in audiobook yet? I'm asking for myself now, being purely nerd.
No, but so this is the 4th book in the Fallen Empire universe, and I think they're working on book 2 right now for the audiobook version, so it'll be a little bit before they get to this one.
Okay. That was for me. Now, we do have, we mentioned families that listen. We did a horrible job at our cussing today, but what are you going to do when you put grunts together? It happens. In our defense, we were left unsupervised.
Yes.
But what would you rate this as far as if you're using a movie scale rating for readability, like R, PG, whatever?
Probably PG-13 to R. There's no sex or anything, but there are a lot of F-bombs. There's a lot of sexual innuendo and things like that. And a lot of gratuitous violence.
Okay. I got nothing wrong with that. So where did you get the idea for this story, and how did you get involved in the Fallen Universe world? Because this obviously is not your IP.
No. Yeah. I got involved in the Fallen Empire universe after I released my first book, which was, indie published. And J.F. Holmes over at Canon Publishing found it, liked it, and said, hey, you should write in the Fallen Empire universe. So I read all those books several times. I was like, okay, this is actually a pretty cool universe. And I had an idea. And when I got back from my last deployment, me and my platoon sergeant were, pretty good friends. I was one of the squad leaders. And it was basically the whole idea behind this book is what if me and him came back from our deployment and didn't have wives and became mercenaries? And just kind of let it spiral out of control from there, set in this universe. So there's a lot of kind of running jokes that he and I had throughout this book, which hopefully are still funny to people that aren't outside of me and him, but most people seem to get them. But yeah, that's where the idea came from, and that's how I ended up at Canon.
Okay, so how did you meet Holmes that you got invited to do this?
Yeah, so I posted my first book on the military thriller Facebook page that Steve Lepper runs, and I guess he just kind of creeps on that page all the time and found my book, read it, liked it, and just reached out to me. I'm not gonna lie, at first I thought it was a scam, but then I looked him up. I'm like, no, this guy's legit. He's written a lot of books. Canon's real. So all right, I'll go for it.
Okay. Is this something that you think there's going to be more in the future for you, or is this a total one-off?
No. So I left it wide open for a sequel, somewhat intentionally, but and they're already asking me about book 2. They seem to think that it would work really well as a trilogy. I'm still kind of working on the outline for book 2, so we'll see. I might be able to wrap it up in 2 books. It might take 3. We'll kind of see. But I'm working with Dave Hensley on this, and I know you've worked with Dave a lot.
He's a good guy. I like him.
Yeah, great, amazing author, great editor. Really, the reason that he really took this pile of crap and shined it into something that's worth reading. And so, I'm working a lot with him and JF and trying to kind of hammer out the story to bring it to a satisfying conclusion.
Okay. Now, is the Fallen Empire universe, is it like a collection of one-offs that tie, or is there a chronology you're following? Like, what is the organization of the series?
Yeah, so you can read any one of the books, honestly, and kind of jump in anywhere. Like, you could read Doom Company without reading the first three. I will say you will enjoy Doom Company more if you have read the first three, because like I don't take the time to explain the history of the universe in its entirety in this book. But essentially, like, this book is Fall of the Western Roman Empire meets the Cold War in space, right? Where the Romans are actually this alien civilization called the Grausians, and the Germans that took over the Roman military towards the end are humans. And then they're just kind of fighting in the DMZ over the scraps of the old empire. And so that's where my book takes place. It takes place on a DMZ world where there's mercenaries helping out the local government who's dealing with an insurrection.
Okay. So do we have cool Legion armor then?
Yeah, there's it's kind of all over the place. Most of the lesser species compared to the Grausians are limited to like 21st, 22nd century type tech. And of course, like, they're starting to obtain the newer tech because this is the 27th century that this is all taking place in. But like, this is right after the fall of the Grausian Empire, so everybody's kind of scrambling to get what they can. So some outfits are very well equipped, very well organized, and some people, barely better equipped than we are now.
Okay. Actually, the Germanic experience with Rome actually inspired a lot of our English language. So Germany wasn't a concept. It was the Gauls, or was it Goths, Visigoths, Vandals, Franks, and Burgundians. But the Vandals were so destructive. They were basically prehistoric Marines. They were so destructive that the word vandalize means to deface property, comes from them.
Yes.
That's an good inspiration when it comes to organizational structure. We often go to the English when it comes to like fantasy and sci-fi. Everyone wants to be the next monarch, but there's a lot in the ancient world that's kind of cool that you can draw from.
Yeah, and like, everybody over at Canon is a massive history nerd, so you can see like influences from like Roman and medieval type history all throughout. They're even starting to publish like historical fiction over there now.
Oh, cool!
And it's all great.
Now, since you did mention like they have cool uniform, which is always important, rule of cool over everything. Do you have did you use unique rank structures like or do you stick with what people would be familiar with? So like,
I stuck with what people would be familiar with. So the point of view character, the main character, is a sergeant first class.
Okay.
And his kind of partner in crime is a staff sergeant. And they very much use a very U.S. Army type rank structure. And that's kind of a convention for the series. Like, you see it in the other PMCs, so I just kind of stuck with it.
Yeah, the Brits salute weird anyway, palm out and all that nonsense. I mean, come on. And they march funny. So, although I will say that's probably better cardio than our marching when you're doing the goose step and kicking out stuff they do in Europe.
It's also awful for your knees.
I imagine, and it's zero service connection, I'm sure, at the VAs. So when it comes to weaponry, so did you stick with ballistics? Did you go for phasers and plasma rifles or Gauss guns?
So all those things exist in this universe. Most of the private military company that I'm writing about, which is called Highland Combat Applications, and then Doom Company is just one company inside that battalion-sized element. They're using mostly chemically powered projectiles. So the stuff we kind of have now. But I mean, like, laser guns are a thing, plasma guns are a thing, but they're a little less common in the universe because the Grausians, when they use their subject species to fill out their ranks, they would limit them to older tech. So that's what's readily available.
That's a standard trope because you don't want the slave warriors to get too strong.
Exactly.
And that applies in fantasy worlds. I mean, real world example would be, Sparta or Spartans or Spartacus. There we go. The Roman gladiator who escaped and wreaked havoc. Like that that's a very real concern when you have slave armies. So yeah, that makes sense. Now, when we're talking about the enemy, are we talking like traditional combat like we would understand it? Is Doom Company more about space combat? Like what kind of action are we seeing in this story?
So it starts on a space station because these two guys, Branch and Wells, are freelancers, and they end up getting recruited by Highland Combat Applications, and then they get sent to a jungle on some backwater DMZ world. So most of the combat that takes place is in a deep, dark jungle, and it's very ground based. Most of the combat in the Fallen Empire series is very ground based. It's very infantry based. There's not a lot of space combat except in book 2, which is an anthology. There's one about a massive space battle that's very, very important within the universe. But yeah, it's mostly just grunts on the ground doing grunt things.
Why a jungle instead of any other environment you could have picked?
So I've really wanted to do something that was like, I'm a huge fan of like, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, especially Predator. I've always wanted to do something that was kind of like inspired by Predator. So this is I describe this book as like Predator meets Platoon with a little bit of romance.
Is it the two main characters, Platoon Sergeant and this squad leader, they having a romance going on? Is that what's going on?
Oh, I mean, there's definitely that like mildly homoerotic bromance that everyone in the military. And there's like an actual romance going on in the background.
So the important one is between the two soldiers. Got it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So when it comes to action, are we talking more small squad maneuver, fire and maneuver stuff, or do you got large scale like set piece battles?
It's mostly small scale stuff. These guys are mostly like light infantry going out into the jungle, running recon ops and things like that. And kind of the premise is that Highland Combat Applications is most of the leadership is wildly incompetent. They're more concerned with the bottom line and profits, and they're mostly business people, not actual military people. So the decisions they make oftentimes don't make sense and put the guys in more danger than is necessary to complete the mission.
So basically what you're saying is you've written if the Air Force were leading the Marines.
That is a really good summary. I'm going to use that.
Feel free. So I grew up in a military family. I don't know about your history. I know you served, obviously. But so for us, like the idea of being a mercenary, fighting just for the money instead of for love of country, et cetera, is like something that was just dirty, left an ick. Is that something you had to overcome to write a mercenary unit?
Not really, because quite honestly, when I left the Marine Corps, I very much considered going the private military contractor route because the money was good and I didn't know what else to do, and the war was winding down. But also, if you want to write in the Fallen Empire universe, you pretty much have to write a mercenary company because the general premise of the series is that because of this big drawdown, like 'cause we're in peacetime now essentially in this universe, so you have billions of out of work soldiers whose only skill is pulling a trigger, so they join mercenary companies.
Okay. Yeah, it's one of those ones where you never see what happens when the war's over. Because I imagine the Halo universe, for instance, was really interesting with all those soldiers coming home, surviving all of that. And I imagine you kind of got the same effect in this world. It sounds like,
yeah,
kind of listlessness, and you need something for those men to do before they take over your government.
Yeah, and I think one of the best examples in the universe is actually the third book called Silent Violence by Michael Morton, who's an Air Force vet who somehow actually wrote very convincing Marines for the most part. And it literally shows like this company of Marines getting deactivated and all of them being like, well, what now? So they just become mercs, and it's incredibly good. I mean, all 4 of the books are really good. But I think that one is probably the best at showing like the actual transition from like, oh, we're in the military to we're guns for hire.
So in this universe, do they have like some units are specialized in one thing? Because in real world, like you're going to have merc units that specialize in, we're really good at this one particular thing. Security versus, VIP protection versus, actual house to house. They kind of get reputations in the real world. Is that something that happens in the Fallen Empire universe?
Yeah, so we have this like big world building Bible with all the units listed out with their specialties. So like just tying back into Michael Morton's book, Silent Violence, that's the 76th microgravity. I can't remember, but missed. Like I can't remember exactly what it stands for, but they specialize in low G warfare essentially. So like fighting out in vacuum or like on a space station with like the grav plating turned off. Like they very much will assault your ship or your space station, whatever, vent the atmosphere and come in and kill you in low G. And that is their bread and butter. Then there's other companies who specialize in like like armor or light reconnaissance or security, whatever. Like every unit kind of has their niche. Highland is kind of looking for theirs in mind, and they really struggle to find it without giving too much away.
So how did you come, like, we're going to talk about the Doom Company name because that's very personal to you, and I think that's cool to talk about. But for the Highland Company, how did you come up with their name? Was it just toying with it, or does that have significance for you too?
It actually does. So my battalion in the Marine Corps, we were called the Highlanders.
Okay.
The 1st Light Armored Reconnaissance Battalion. And so I picked that just because it did have that significance to me. Originally, they were going to be on a world called Caledonia and like have all this like Scottish heritage, kind of like my unit did. But then I read another book set in the Galaxy's Edge universe. So it was like, man, I feel like I'm just going to seem like I'm plagiarizing the shit out of this if I write it this way. You might be familiar with that one.
I know what you're talking about.
But so I was like, so I was like, I'm just going to give them the name, and we're not going to, attach all the Scottish stuff to it. And then, obviously, like Doom Company has that was the unit I was in the Army. That's what we called our company.
So how did you guys get that name? Was that pre-existing when you got there, or did it happen when you were deployed?
Yeah, so it happened. It was pre-existing when I got there. So I was in Bravo Company, 1st Battalion, 116th Infantry, which is that's the Stonewall Brigade. It was part of the 29th ID, which was made up of former Confederate and Union Army units that were meshed together, which is why their symbol is a blue and gray yin yang. But the cool thing about the 116th is, and you may have heard of the Bedford Boys in relation to D-Day, right?
Yep.
So they were the Bedford Boys, right? Our brigade, like they hit Omaha Beach. The town of Bedford, which is 30 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, lost a significant portion of its male population that day. The National D-Day Memorial is actually in Bedford because that town took so many casualties. So, if everybody wants to talk crap about the National Guard, like we took Omaha Beach, baby. And the Legion of Doom thing actually came about in the early 90s, as I understand it. It was just a bunch of rednecks in the woods who liked wrestling and the Grateful Dead. So there was a tag team wrestling duo in the 90s called the Legion of Doom. So they just ripped off that name and then slapped the 29th ID symbol on the Grateful Dead skull and said, boom, we're the Legion of Doom.
I like it. I thought maybe Doom would be like the video game.
No, like a lot of people thought that, but not really. No.
That's cool. Now, with the relation for your platoon sergeant, because he's the point of view character, I know that as a team leader, even though I led enough people that it was a squad, just because we based it on the trucks, not the people inside them, and so 3 trucks means 9 people. I didn't appreciate how much the platoon level leadership actually had to do, because I'm like, they're just a bunch of lazy so-and-sos sitting in the rear while we're out fighting. Until I started writing books where I actually had to consider their jobs. Was that something that was a culture shock to you, going from being a squad leader and then, holy crap, I got to write like what the platoon commander and company commander and all them are doing?
A little bit, but kind of keeping with the like Highland is incompetent kind of thing. There's a lot of times where Sergeant First Class Branch, who's the main character, who's based off a guy named Branch, uncreatively. I straight up asked him, was like, "Do you mind if I just use your actual name in this book?" He's like, "Please do it. That'd be so awesome." And I changed his first name, but like kept the last name. And so there's a lot of times he's left in the dark and he's just kind of sitting there like wondering like, okay, what the hell is actually going on? Because the officers are keeping stuff from him because like his lieutenant is just a little like, Nepo baby who is in his position because of who his daddy is. And they don't see eye to eye. And so kind of yes, kind of no, because he's almost kind of a squad leader in practice, but he still very much has these platoon sergeant worries. And luckily I had this amazing resource, the actual Sergeant Branch to draw on.
Yeah, I actually had to reach out to one of my old platoon sergeants. And I was like, yeah, I know I was a little bit of a jerk to you, probably gave you a few gray hairs, but I need your opinion now. And so it cost me a steak dinner. I had to take him out to say I was sorry before he would talk.
If you're even half as bad as me, that's not a bad price.
No, not at all. I'm just going to say, like, I couldn't exist in the modern army. I was a corporal 3 times. I just like to party a lot. So now, is that something? So that is a trope in modern military. If you're going to set it like real world stuff, is the hard drinking, hard fighting, at the bars, whatever. And it's true. It sticks because it's true. Is that something you leaned into with the characters that make up Doom Company?
Yeah. So the opening scene actually takes place at a bar.
I love it.
Yeah, and the character that's based on me, Wells, like he is there to get drunk and get laid. Those are his only 2 concerns.
Important priorities.
Yeah. Whereas like Branch is about the drinking, but not the getting laid part, and that'll make sense when you read the book. But
because he's in love with Wells, obviously.
Yeah, obviously. But so just kind of a funny aside, just because I was having this conversation with Branch, but like. So, he was married with kids, and I was in the process of divorcing the practice wife when we came back from that deployment.
The starter wife.
And so I was like, like to make this story work, I had to kill your wife and kids. And he's like, what? I was like, yeah, it's the only way to make it work. So I killed his wife and kids. And that's kind of like one of his internal dilemmas that's going on throughout the book. But
hopefully the lady and her offspring forgive you. For fictionalizing their death.
Yeah, I'm kind of hoping Amy just never reads it. To be quite honest with you. She's the one person on the planet I don't want to read this book.
Yep. That is awesome. Well, not for Amy, the fictional one anyway, but
yeah.
Now is the death shown in the book or does it happen off screen?
So it happens off screen, and I kind of like hint at it, and then like he eventually has a flashback to it. And it's very much something that impacts who he is as a person, how he leads other people. And, there's a lot of like self-esteem issues going on there because he was a reservist in this book when him and Wells met, and Wells was like a shit hot, like recon Marine. And so when they got
no self-inserts at all.
Yeah, I know. Right. And so when they got picked up by this PMC, he's like, why am I the platoon sergeant? And Wells is just a squad leader. But, Branch has this ability to think at a higher level than Wells, who's just kind of like Wells can go in and kill the enemy and he can run a squad. But when you blow it up to a larger scale, he just can't do it. Whereas Branch has the ability to think at that higher level, Highland realizes that and makes him a platoon sergeant.
Yeah, that's one of the things that you realize, because I took a history of sports in college, and almost every sport known to man, except for golf, started as a training ground for young warriors. And you quickly realize, if you've ever played any contact sports, the ability to do the hitting and the ability to read the field and then make those decisions, the quarterback, the hooker in rugby, I'm sure there's equivalent in soccer. I don't know what it is, but like that's a whole different skill set.
Yes.
And so that is something that most people don't realize because most people haven't been punched in the face.
Yes.
I appreciate that. Now, you set this on a jungle planet. So how much of the Vietnam tropes and that kind of mythology that exists in the modern military from our forebears did you lean into for this story?
I leaned into it pretty hard. There's the idea of the kind of like the lower class grunt who's doing the actual fighting, the pampered, pretty boys or, rich kids who are made officers and don't actually have to do anything. And, a lot of, like, why are we here? This is dumb. Quite honestly, things you still see in the military. But, I loved, before I decided I hated watching military movies, I loved, movies like Platoon or Full Metal Jacket or, Hamburger Hill. Like I loved Vietnam movies. And then like even the Galaxy's Edge stuff that's set on Sidon was a big influence either too, because that's basically like space Vietnam.
Yeah.
So I leaned into that pretty heavily, but I also tried to kind of do my own thing with it, mix in a little bit of stuff from Afghanistan, but throw it in a jungle. And then, you know, as you can tell by the cover, there's some monsters running around the jungle, which is like where the Predator stuff comes in.
Yeah. Afghanistan was weird. I'm glad both of my tours were in Iraq, because like I've heard stories where some of the places that we were fighting in the mountains were so high up that there wasn't enough oxygen for the helicopters to get lift. So they had to kind of angle up and then hope on the decline that they made it up and over, because they didn't then they'd catch lift on the other side. The idea of operating in such a like inhospitable terrain is just insane. I mean, the desert already sucks, but at least I didn't have to worry about whether I was going to be able to breathe.
Yeah, that's why I'm glad I was in a river valley.
Yeah, it's you know, you don't really appreciate the difference terrains make. Of course, I know people that were in Afghanistan are like, I would have, you know, this was so much easier than Iraq. It's really kind of, you know, whatever you know is what you know. But there's something to be said for inhospitable terrain and how that affects both the mission, the people, and just the culture in general. Now, the bad guys in this, obviously the monsters that live in the woods, in the jungles, but there's also enemy forces. Are they alien or human enemies?
So they're mostly alien. So I made up 2 different species for this. There's a native species, which are essentially like this universe's version of Khajiit from, like, you know, the Elder Scrolls. Like cat.
I love you already, man. Keep going.
I know, right? And so there's a kind of like this like lost tribe of them out in the jungle, and I won't give too much away about that because it's kind of a centerpiece of the mystery around it. But there's a bunch of them out in the jungle, and then like they're the primary species on that planet, and then there's a lot of the other species in this universe that have settled there after the Grousian conquest of it. But then, you know, there's also enemies within Highland, because like you do have that incompetent profit-driven leadership who doesn't actually care about the boots on the ground.
So one of the things that we experienced when we deployed to both of our locations was the locals that try to sell you stuff and the interacting with the local cultures. Is that something with the way you set the story up you were able to show?
It's hinted at a little bit. So the story kind of goes from when they're at this bar getting recruited, and then it fast forwards 6 months. And they talk about this brief time they spent in the capital city fighting, but most of it takes place out in the jungle, and they're just like, there's no one out here. Why are we even here? And then they eventually figure out why they're there. And it's not why Highland told them they were there. So there's not a lot of interaction with the locals other than shooting them.
I mean, that's important too. No, I just know it's, for me, the whole haggling culture of the bazaars and all that was like a culture shock. Meeting actual nomads was like culture shock. And sometimes it can be fun to show that almost in an interstellar setting. There are some series that do that really, really well.
That's something I want to do in my own personal series, the Terra Ascending universe, and that I'm kind of working on with that stuff. But that doesn't really pop up in Doom Company.
Now, do they engage in the asymmetrical warfare? Because obviously, like Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, it was all asymmetrical. The booby traps, the bombs, the ambushes, etc. Was that used, or was the combat more conventional in this book?
It's very, very asymmetrical. There's times where it's very low tech. It looks like Vietnam. It feels like Vietnam. And then there are times that there's orbital bombardments going on. And it really depends on how interested corporate is in what they're doing at any given time.
Okay. On a scale of, a bourbon and I'll be okay to, oh my God, I need an emergency appointment with my shrink, how intense is the action?
I'd give it like a 7. If you resonate with some of these things, maybe you do need the bourbon and the appointment. So I think for some veterans or people that have, lost somebody who's very close to them, as, you and I have, like, it's going to punch you right in the feels.
Okay. Have you gotten any feedback from actual like reader fan type stuff? Has it been well received?
Yeah. I mean, I got the obligatory drive-by 1 star with no actual review on Amazon, which I had my existential crisis about, and we're over it. But everything else has been like 4 or 5 stars. People are talking about the action, the character development. I think this is probably my strongest piece of writing in terms of actual character development, where you see Branch go through this existential crisis and deal with things that have happened in his past as he's trying to keep his dudes alive.
Yeah, my favorite review was actually a 1 star. They told me this is what happens if a 12-year-old with ADHD writes gun porn. And I'm like, dude, can I use this on my marketing?
Yeah, that sounds like a great book, actually.
But unfortunately, that was the Legion of Wigs. But unfortunately, Amazon yeeted a bunch of reviews a couple of years ago, and that was one of the ones that didn't make the cut for some reason. So it's just not there anymore. I feel really depressed. I wanted to use that, but whatever. Yeah, it's always weird how people react to a story. Like one of the things we used to do on the reviews on this podcast is we'd go to a section where we talk about the 5 stars and the 1 stars and kind of get the author's reaction. And it was always fun how often you would find the same incident get a 1 star from some readers and a 5 star from others. Like there's no rhyme or reason to it sometimes.
I mean, it's all people's preferences. And like, sometimes you'll get like the reviews that make me mad. And I've not seen one of these on my books, but I've seen it on books that I really enjoy. I've seen a bunch of them for Legionnaire. Where it says, I don't normally read middle sci-fi, but I was like, then shut up.
Unless you're going to say something nice, because if it's not my preferred genre, but I really liked it, that's helpful. If it's not your preferred genre and you don't like it, well, you've already said it's not your genre. Like, okay.
Yeah, like I'm not going to leave a review for a paranormal, horror book because I don't like that genre. So I'm probably not going to like it no matter how good it is.
Yeah. It's always weird where people draw the lines, like space dragons you're okay with, but Marines that cost a little too much, was a bridge too far. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. I've gotten some feedback about like the way my characters speak, and they're like, it's so harsh. I'm like, that is extremely toned down compared to how actual Marines speak.
I actually wrote, so they did this like a Pew Pew anthology, and I can't remember the exact name, but it's supposed to be space comedy, like sci-fi comedy. And all I know for humor is barracks humor. So I'm like, I'm going to write the first 2,000 words of this short story, and I'll see if it's a little too much for MD Cooper. And they responded something to the fact, but we appreciate your effort, but this is not the direction we want to go. And then at some point in time, the idea was stuck in my head. So I finished it. It is now The Vacuum Sucks Hard. The Adventures of the USS Big Stick. It is a comedy, but I actually was so crude with it that I had to get one of my good friends who's a Marine, to help me tone it down so it was socially acceptable enough that I could publish it. So I feel you. Sometimes if you write the way grunts actually talk to each other, you're like, wait, do they hate each other? No. That's how they show their love.
Yeah, and like I'm working a lot with a Marine vet and this British lady who didn't serve but is married to a U.S. Army veteran, and she gives us crap so much for like the jokes we make and stuff, and we're like, this is really PG compared to the actual barracks. Like you poor sheltered child. Like,
yeah, that's one of those things. It's like people don't understand, like, dudes that are sometimes overly aggressive. Because I don't think it's just a military thing. I think I've seen it with cops and firefighters too. But like,
oh yeah,
I'm nice to you if I don't really respect you or don't like you. But if you're my friend, like, I'm gonna bust your chops. Like, I actually had a friend that was nice to me one day. I'm like, wait, are you mad at me?
Yeah, at that point, like, I'm wondering if they're suicidal. I mean, that's why I work with firefighters. It's exactly the same as being with the infantry. Like absolute assholes to each other. Like, I can walk into my job as a civilian, flip off my first patient, tell them to go F themselves, and like, all right, well, let's get to work. And it's amazing, and I love it.
Absolutely. Bedside manner, who needs it? So when you wrote the ending, because I know you've got to get up crazy early for your job, and so we're running on time. Is this one where you left room for more? You mentioned in the beginning that maybe there's a sequel. But like, do you see this playing out as more than just the 2 books?
Hopefully. So I did leave it open for a sequel. There is a satisfying ending to the primary issue or conflict in this book. But at the end, like, Branch has a couple of problems he still needs to solve.
Okay. is there anything we didn't talk about Doom Company that you think listeners and readers really ought to know before we wrap this up?
I mean, this was a very, as I mentioned before, I started writing as a mental health exercise, and this was an interesting exercise for me. Is like Wells is the character based on me, whereas Branch is the point of view character. So it almost started as me writing about myself through someone else's eyes, which was very eye-opening, because I would write Wells in ways I would react, but I was looking at him through somebody else's eyes, and I'm like, man, I really was kind of an asshole, or I was kind of all over the place, but then at the same time, like I got to see like, okay, like maybe I was, but at the same time, I was also supportive when I needed to be. And sometimes that's therapeutic to look back when, and I'm sure you've been through this too, where you tend to focus on the negative sometimes when you look back to things that happened in the military, and you blame yourself for things that maybe aren't necessarily your fault. And maybe you actually were doing more good than harm. And I think it's important to recognize that.
Sometimes that's the hard thing to accept, is you made the best decision of a bunch of bad decisions. And that's sometimes difficult. That you learn this in sports too. But like, no decision is always the worst decision you can make.
Yes.
And so sometimes you might have messed up, but doing something probably saved more lives than if you just stood there and panicked about it. So like that's sometimes something I had to come to grips with when I was writing as well. And there are still some scenes I write, I'm like, okay, I need a break from this. So I definitely feel you. With the Terra Ascending, is that going to be coming out soon? You did mention that one.
Yeah, so I am working on the sequel to my first book. I've actually rewritten it 3 times.
Okay.
And the little novella I put out earlier this year, Boarding Action, which is told from one of the side characters' point of view, was actually supposed to be part of that. I was like, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit, but it would be a really good origin story for this guy, Coleman, who's a naval intelligence officer. So I put that out. And then I am working on Terra Ascending 2, which rather than being a collection of interrelated short stories is going to be an actual novel told from the point of view of Aurelius, who is 2 of the 5 short stories in the first book, and then Coleman, who is the naval intelligence officer. And I'm going to try and dive a little more into the type of themes that I dove into with Doom Company, where it's a little more introspective, but there's still a lot of action. There's going to be a couple of scenes that are I would describe as mildly smutty, so maybe some women will read it too. Who knows?
Good.
Yeah, but hopefully, I'm hoping early next year for that one.
Cool. All right, so this is the part. Oh, before we do, you mentioned the kinetic frontline thing. Do you want to tell the listeners what that is real quick?
Yeah, so that's a collection of authors and beta readers, ARC readers, editors who are all working together. We're kind of trying to do a lot of the things a publisher would do without some of the drawbacks or like the money changing hands that a publisher would have. It's more of we're all super nerdy, super passionate about sci-fi, and we're trying to, developmentally edit, beta read, help each other out as much as we can. We're obviously still pulling in other editors and stuff and artists as needed, but we're trying to do as much of it as we can for each other. And it's been kind of nice because, I'm sure you've been in the situation where you've hired a freelancer and they don't actually give a crap about your book and they don't really put in the effort that you think is necessary, but we're all super invested in each book. We have a book coming out that called War Beyond Galaxies by Ana del Alamo, which is going to be out later this month, that we've all poured a lot of time and effort into, and we're all super invested and we all want to see it do well, even though most of us aren't going to make a dime off it. That's all going to go to Anna, and she deserves every penny. But it's really cool. It's a very supportive group, and like I said, it's like a publisher, but not really.
Okay, so this is the part, dear listener, where I remind you to please be kind and speak your minds on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books. It really does make a difference. And with that, how might we find you on the wild interwebs?
So we got, just go ahead and keep plugging Kinetic Frontline. We got kineticfrontline.com, where you can see my stuff, Artie Fluke stuff on the Del Alamos, all the things we're working on. Sign up for our newsletter. We're doing a joint newsletter now because I'm not interesting enough to do my own every month. I'm on Instagram, very active on Instagram and TikTok at The Wise Author. I pop in on Facebook occasionally. We're trying to establish a presence on X and Substack as well, but probably most active on Instagram and TikTok.
Okay. And you can find us, a dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we're linked to all the things, the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the TikTok, the Twitters, the Spotify, the Discord, the Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page. We have an email at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. For professional purposes only, people. Save the shenanigans from Adam Stabby Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put in the comment section this for the podcast, and I promise I will keep my co-hosts duly caffeinated. They will drink that coffee brand coffee till it pours out of their eyeballs, and we paddle away in a canoe in the river of Java goodness. That didn't sound as cool as when it was in my head, so I'll do better next time, dear listener. But seriously, these episodes aren't free to produce, and every penny helps. And we greatly appreciate your patronage so we can keep bringing you these awesome interviews and panels and book discussions and book reviews and all of the cool things. And it's a lot of fun. Go ahead and, go follow JR, the other JR, the cooler one, definitely skinnier one. Go follow him as well. It's a lot of fun. His content is amusing. And it resonates with a lot of the dudes I know too, because I've sent your videos to other people I serve with. It's kind of they enjoy it. Although they did want to know, did you commit to the bit and eat the crown? I told them that they didn't want to know what was behind the movie magic.
I did swallow.
With that, before we get ourselves in any more trouble, thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time, where we'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. Thank you for coming on, JR. This was a lot of fun.
It was great. Thanks for having me again.
All right, with that, I'm going to hit the end button. Don't cuss yet.